I will give you a short introduction to Jenkins X. Everybody knows what Jenkins is? Hopefully. Yeah, just Jenkins. This is completely different, you'll see. And everybody's using Kubernetes here, right? What the fuck? Okay. Be ashamed, please. It's been 3 years, everybody's using it, you can use it as well. Okay, so very quick introduction first. This is how I look like. My name is Viktor. I work for CloudBees. We are a company behind Jenkins. I'm one of the Docker captains. I write some blogs, some courses, some books, YouTube videos, books. I have a Twitter. So that's all you need to know about me. Now, before I explain you what Jenkins X is, I'm going to tell you how we got here, a short history of Jenkins from some 15 years ago. But before I move there, first thing I'm going to do is to create a cluster in Kubernetes. And I'm going to do that simply because it takes like 5 minutes to create it. So while I'm talking, our cluster is being created, all the nodes and everything, right? If you have any questions, just stop me at any moment, okay? So I don't know how to type and speak and hold the mic at the same time. So to create, so with Jenkins X is a wrapper around a lot of tools, only one of them being Jenkins, right? And we have a new binary called JX. And one of the things you can do with them, the first one is to create a cluster. So I'm going to say, okay, let's create a cluster in GKE. Everybody knows what GKE is. If you don't, please go out. This is too advanced for you then. Okay, it's Google. First word, J is for Google. The rest is Kubernetes engine. So I'm going to create a cluster. It asks me for my credentials. I'm going to use my own. I'm going to allow Google to create my cluster. And if I move back, it asks me which project do you want. I'm going to use that one. And now it is creating cluster. We have 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes to tell you all of history about that led us to Jenkins X until this is done. And the rest will be all hands-on demo. Is this going? No. Sorry, one more thing. I need to choose where I'm going to run it. I'm going to run it, I don't know, in Europe, for example. And I'm going to use relatively small VMs because I don't want to waste too much money. Maximum number of nodes is going to be 5. And the minimum number of nodes, 3. So now it is creating a cluster, right? Now I have 5 minutes. So what happened over 15 years, more or less? I'm going to give you a very brief history of Jenkins and everything that led. First of all, Kosuke, the tallest Japanese person known to man, created Hudson. Is anybody old enough here to know what Hudson is? Only 5. Okay, 5 old persons. Excellent. So he created Hudson when he worked for Sun, and that was a huge success almost overnight. First, almost whole Sun started using Hudson, and then the community grew overnight, and it became huge, and everybody loved it because at that time there was no Travis, there was no Circle CI, there was no whatever you're using. Jenkins was the first one that I know of, maybe not really the first one, that actually was worth the trouble. So when you hear Hudson, that is original Jenkins. Now you might ask, those of you who don't know what Hudson is, you might ask, why is he talking about Hudson? And the reason is simple. In 2009, Oracle purchased Sun. And anybody working for Oracle here? Anybody likes Oracle? Okay, so what Oracle does when they buy a company, or with any of their product, they destroy anything good and decent in this world. That's the official business strategy. It's not me inventing the things. It's hidden in small letters somewhere, for sure. And they tried to do the same thing with Hudson. Basically, they wanted to move it, to make it less open source, less community-driven, and more. Basically, if you're younger and you seem relatively young, then you might know what happened to MariaDB, for example, right? Oracle purchased MySQL, told them that open source is a bad thing, and we got MariaDB. The same thing happened happened with Hudson. Koske was very unhappy with the way Oracle deals with their business and forked his own project into what today is Hudson. And then, now, that was happening in 2018. That's 7 years ago. And back then, and still for most of you using Jenkins, Jenkins is the ugliest software there is. I don't know if you ever use Jenkins. It hurts your eyes when you look at it. That's how it is. It really does. It's horrible. So not long ago, like 3-4 years ago, first thing that we did is switch to pipelines. Meaning that freestyle jobs, having 57 jobs that are in charge of a single pipeline or of a single process, that's a thing of the past. And more importantly, those of you who do use Jenkins and are used to click, and then something happens, that's also gone. Now you write code. If you're not used to writing code, then better stop doing whatever you're doing. You're in the wrong industry. Go and become a doctor or something. So we switched to pipeline. And we made Jenkins much prettier than it was before. When I say we, community, companies, and so on and so forth. And what happened then is that containers became a thing, like 4 years ago, or something like that. And containers are a perfect example of something very beneficial for continuous delivery, continuous deployment. By the way, we're not speaking about continuous integration anymore. That's a thing of the past. That's gone, right? So we adopted containers, and from now on, almost everything that we do with Jenkins is around containers. If you expect some new features without containers, you're into a huge disappointment. It's only containers. That's the only model that we see beneficial in this for those processes. Microservices became a thing. Everybody's using microservices. Most of you are doing it, and most of you are faking that you're doing it. We can speak about that later. Kubernetes became the de facto orchestrator, right? Every company now is planning or is already using Kubernetes to run everything. Not everything, a lot of things, and CI/CD is not an exception. So we added support for that, and that wasn't still enough. What we really wanted to do, like since maybe 2 years ago, is to completely redefine how you do continuous delivery, continuous deployment. We are moving away from the concept of here is a tool, and then you figure out what you need to do, because all of you think that you know how to do stuff, and then it turns out you don't. So we came up with the idea to define the whole process, not give you the tool, but give you the process that you must follow if you want to do continuous delivery, continuous deployment. And that effort, we call it internally, externally, however you want it, Jenkins X. Simply because this year everything needs to have X in their name. So let me show you how that really works. Now, if you want to repeat the same thing what I'm doing from home, the only thing you really need, you need two things. First, access to some servers where you can install Kubernetes unless you already have it. kubectl might be confusing, but if you're using Kubernetes, then you know what it is. If you're not, then you're going to get lost anyway. And install JX. Just follow the documentation how to install it. Everything else, I'm going to do in front of you right now. All right, so bear with me. I hope that you can hear me like this. If you can, then I don't know what to do, unless somebody wants to hold the torch. The spin. So first thing that after I created a cluster. Hello? Hello? Okay. So it asked me whether I want to create Ingress controller. Those of you not calling yourself Kubernetes ninjas, very short explanation is that Ingress controller is a sort of a dynamic proxy that will forward our requests from that enter the cluster somewhere to an application, right? I want it. It's going to install Helm. Basically, what I'm showing you right now is a streamlined process. It will set up everything you need for CI/CD. No, sorry, not CI, CD. And Helm is a package management for Kubernetes. If you're used to Ubuntu, it's equivalent to apt-get. If you're used to RHEL or Yum, RHEL or CentOS, equivalent to Yum, and so on and so forth. This will take a minute. You have approximately 45 seconds for questions, because once this is done, I'm going to move very fast. You will not have time for anything. No? No questions? Good for you. Then let's watch each other in silence. Okay. The domain I want for my cluster, I'm going to use the predefined, which uses nip.io. If you don't know what nip.io is, tell me. Otherwise, I will assume that you do. It asks me, of course, there is no CD process without Git. In this case, it's going to be GitHub. And it asks me, what is your username in GitHub? It is Farcic. I'm going to keep the default. It already knows most of the things. It says that there is local environment. Do I want to recreate it? Because I did that. Did the same demo a few days ago. I do. And what now it did, it is setting up locally, cloning the code that it needs, the sample codes, sample repositories, and after that, it is installing Jenkins X itself, right? So while I'm talking to you, while you're looking at the screen, waiting for something to change, it is installing Jenkins, or to be more precise, Jenkins X. This is a bit boring part until everything is installed, but I wanted you to see how easy it is to set up everything without really much of a fuss. Continue looking at each other in silence. Yeah, what else? Almost there. Really? Nobody? Is this because it's, oh, please. What is what? nip.io. So nip.io is a service. It's a public service that will, so if you have a domain, some IP.nip.io, nip.io domain will forward it to that IP. And that way I get, I can quickly generate domains instead of going now to register GoDaddy and so on and so forth. It's basically whenever you need a domain to test something, nip.io or chip.io, one of the two is a good thing. Anybody else? While waiting, maybe one more minute. Is it because I'm speaking English and you're from Spain and traditionally don't speak English and then you're shy? Is that the thing? Yes, I can. You see, if you don't ask questions, you get nothing. Is this better? More? More? Don't be shy. Is this okay? Excellent. Yes?
Earlier you chose GKE.
Yes.
Would you recommend Minikube or some other alternative if there is no way, if GKE is out of the equation, what would be your second choice?
For a demo or for real?
I mean, well, for real. Imagine you have
Minikube is only locally. You don't do Minikube is only for you to play around. It's not a real cluster.
not even meant for development?
For development, yes, but you can. It's easier for development to use Docker for desktop. But unless you're on Linux. If you're on Linux, then you have basically no alternative. Where is my? Yeah. Any other question?
What is the difference really between Jenkins X and normal Jenkins with the Kubernetes Cloud plugin?
Yeah. So normal Jenkins with Kubernetes Cloud plugin is a tool that you use to define a process and do whatever you want. Jenkins X is a set of tools, Jenkins being only one of them, And that Jenkins is already optimized to work for Kubernetes. And more importantly, and you will see soon, it defines the process. So it's not like, what do you think you should do? It's Jenkins X tells you what to do. You adapt your processes to Jenkins X, not the other way around. It's, I think that the major contribution with Jenkins X is defining the process rather than the tool itself. The tool is awesome as well. And also another thing is that you will see that I will rarely go to UI. I have a logic that if you want to see something moving on a screen, then watch Netflix. If you want to do the real job, then terminal is your friend. Okay? I know it's scary, but okay. We have the Kubernetes cluster. Kubernetes cluster with Helm, with the Chart Museum, with Jenkins X, with a bunch, everything that we need. And there is a password that I will store in a variable for now. So let's see, first step. What do you do? What do you do when you want to start working on a new project? The first thing you want to do is to create the project itself. So I'm going to create a quick start. Jenkins X creates quick start. Basically, what that will do is that it will create the whole project, everything that I need to work on a new application. Repository, required files, everything. So Jex create quick start, and it asks me, okay, what is the type of application you want to create, right? ASP.NET, don't judge me. If it would be me, it wouldn't be there. Golang, Jenkins Quick Start, Node.js, Python, and so on and so forth, right? There is a list of predefined, we call them build packs, which you can extend yourself, right? So for your company, you can create your own build pack and say, this is how my projects start. I don't want to waste time trying to figure it out myself. There is a big build pack already. Now, since you can also do the same thing with -L and say, language, I'm going to do Go. Don't ask me questions. Because everybody here codes in Go, right? Yeah, I knew it. Okay, so how am I going to call that project? I'm going to call it default, Golang HTTP. Do I want to use my own username to manage that project in Git? Of course I do. Should I initialize Git? I will. Commit messages, something. And which organization I belong to? This is my own GitHub organization with Farcic as well. And Golang HTTP. Now what happens in the background is that it creates a Git repository with a given name in my own organization, and it pushes some files there. And while I'm talking to you, the process of the whole continuous delivery or continuous deployment is already initiated, right? It already started building, and soon it will be testing, and then it will start promoting, and so on and so forth. You will see that in action very soon. Now, to show you what it created, if I list the contents of the directory, Golang HTTP, you can see that those are the files, initial files, quick start files, that my new application starts with, right? There is main Go, that is the main function in the new application, some Jenkins file that defines the pipeline itself, Docker file, because we are building Docker images, make file, and so on and so forth, right? Even charts that are used for deployment. Everything is baked in. So let me see. If I open it, in browser, you can see it already created a new repository, pushed it. You can see by the date that I'm not faking it. You cannot see it because it's too small. Now you can. This is my GitHub repository. It already got whatever it needs to have. So let's see what else do we have. Very quick look at the Docker file. This is the Docker file it created, very basic one. In most cases, you don't need more than basic. You just think you do. Jenkins file is also there. This defines the whole process, the whole pipeline from a commit until it is deployed to production. Everything is here. And if you look at the charts, Those are the two Helm charts. Remember, charts are a packaging mechanism in Kubernetes that will be used. The Golang HTTP is the chart that will be deployed to production. All the definitions, everything Kubernetes needs to know about my application to deploy to production. And preview is for environments where we happen to have maybe, hopefully not, manual testing. And then if you want to see it in action before you deploy it to production, that's the chart. Okay, what else? Now, what else did it do? Now, if you're familiar with Jenkins, you probably know, or any other tool actually, you need a webhook so that a commit to a repository will notify your tool to start building, testing, and everything it does, right? That's also there. It was created for me a moment ago. It sends a webhook. It will notify my Jenkins X every time there is a commit to the repository. What else? So let's take a look at, before I move and show you in action Jenkins itself, one thing you should know is that those are the supported projects right now. If you want to extend it, you just either fork it and do a pull request, or you don't do pull request because you don't believe in open source. It's your choice. And if you don't like Git for whatever unknown reason, you can have it locally as well, as long as those packs, those starter packs exist somewhere. You should be okay. So let's see what's happening in my cluster while I was talking to you. I don't see my cursor. This is so hard. Okay, so these are all the things that that Jenkins X JX binary CLI installed. What I mentioned before: chart museum, Docker registry, where it will store the images, chart museum, where it will source chart, and so on and so forth. Now let me open Jenkins itself. JX console. Everything is command line driven. That's also important. So JX console will open Jenkins, just in case you do like Pretty Color and you cannot afford Netflix. And you see that it already created 3 jobs out of the box. I didn't tell it anything. One job is Golang HTTP. This is the job that manages my application, the application I just created. And the other 2 are environments. Now, this is important because Jenkins X is following GitOps principles, meaning that every change to any environment is stored in a Git repository, right? So if in this case I have 2 environments, staging and production, if you would have 5 environments, you would still have 5 repositories. Everything is recorded, and everything is driven by commits to Git. Doesn't matter whether those commits are done by you or done by Jenkins. Somebody does a commit, and that starts a process. Like, for example, if you want to deploy to production, you change the release version, you do whatever you need to do in that repository, and then it goes to production, right? This is not specific to Jenkins X. This is simply how GitOps more or less works. But since I told you that I don't like pretty colors, most of the things you can do from command line. So, for example, JX, get activities. What is happening right now in Jenkins? And you can see that it actually did already quite a lot of things while I was speaking, right? It created 3 jobs. Those 3 jobs initiated 3 separate builds, and they set up my staging environment is already up and running, or configured to be up and running, production as well, and it started building my first release. Now let's take a look at activities specific to my application. I'm going to say JX get activities. I want to see activities of the application called Golang HTTP, and I want to watch what's going on to follow. And now you can see here that what happened so far. It checked out the code from Git. It skipped some things like creating a snapshot. It built the release. It promoted it to environment. So my application is already deployed and running in a staging environment, waiting for tests to be executed, and optionally for me to do some manual verification if need be. And then you can see that all those things are not done by this job itself. It created pull requests. So for example, when it wanted to deploy to staging, since there is a repository dedicated to the staging environment, it created a pull request. And since I already pre-configured this one to accept pull requests to staging automatically and require acceptance of production only production manually, the pull request is already accepted. It's already merged. And now it is waiting. This job is waiting until another job that is in charge of staging environment finishes doing whatever it needs to do. So let's see what else. If you're interested, for example, to see the logs, again, everything is CLI. JX get build logs. Show me the logs of everything happening in Jenkins. It asks me, okay, but which one do you want really? And I'm gonna actually choose none of them. I'm gonna or specify a slightly different command. Same command, get logs, but this time for this specific application and for the master branch. That's the only branch I have right now. And you can see everything that happened, all the logs. If you're familiar with Jenkins, those are the same logs that you would see if you would go to that build, right? And for example, just as a simple example, no, doesn't matter. Anyways, and the job is finished already, right? So something already happened, something is already finished. So what else can we do? I can take a look at my pipelines. And you can see that all three of those pipelines were executed. Two of them were successful, staging and the application itself. And the first one was actually a failure. That's because it's a production, that's a job pipeline related to production environment, production repository. And that one still, there is no release yet. I did not promote it to production, so it's normal that it failed. Which applications do I manage with Jenkins X at the moment? There is only one application, which is Golang HTTP, and it's already up and running. It is on release 001, and it is accessible through this URL. Let me open it quickly. Hello from Jenkins World. This is my application up and running, right? I haven't executed anything. I haven't done anything. All I did so far, just to show you how to see things, but the only real action was to just create a project. So what else? Let's see. Which applications are running in staging? The same one. If I change staging to production, I should see none. There is nothing running in production yet. And not only that, but it also, since no sane person would ever create a release without creating release itself, release notes, and so on and so forth. There it is. This is my GitHub account. I got my first release. It is recorded. All my users, whomever is using this application, can go and read my notes, release changes, and so on and so forth, and get my source code if I choose to share that. What else? So which environments do we have? I already said that we have two environments right now in our cluster, actually three. Development environment, which is not used, staging, and production. Now I'm going to switch my context of my kubectl to use the staging environment. So GX, I'm going to switch to the staging environment. So from now on, everything I execute is inside of the staging environment. So let's see. Do we really have an application deployed in the staging environment? kubectl get all gives me, and indeed it is. This is my application. I have my pod, I have my service, I have my deployment replica set, and whatever else my application needs. Now, this will differ from one application to another, but these are now Kubernetes resources. What does it say there? I don't see. Is it 10 minutes? Oh, I need to hurry up. I got carried away. Okay, I'm going to skip now I'm going to give you for question, but the only thing, there are many things that I'm going to skip, but what I want to show you is that, let's say that my tests were successful, everything was successful. If there is manual verification, somebody accessed the application and did whatever they need to do to validate it, and I want to move it to production, right? I'm ready for production. I could have set that up automatically as a continuous deployment, or I could do continuous delivery. I'm doing continuous delivery right now, so I'm going to say, JX, I want you to promote application Golang HTTP, version 001, and I want you to promote it from staging to production. And now it is working, and it will be running in production very, very soon. Do you want to use my user as for a pull request? I do. Shit happens. I'm going to promote it again. You cut it from the video later. Yes. Okay, this is embarrassing. It worked until the very end. Imagine that you haven't seen. Oh no, actually it is now working. It is now querying the pull request. Actually, not the pull request. It is waiting for the status. It is waiting until a separate Jenkins process does whatever it needs to do to deploy it to production and potentially test what it deployed until it confirms that it is really promoted and working well. I can, no, I can't. It will be done in a second. Think about questions.
This process that is now happening is visible on the pull request. You know, in the pull request.
Yeah. Yes, it is. What was the Golang HTTP? Yeah. Pull requests. No. Okay. If it would work, it would be visible. I don't know. Something is happening bad. I probably skipped something in order to.
That's on environment already. It's not on Golang.
Oh, yeah, you're right, my friend, yes. You're absolutely right. So let's see, where is the environment production we said, yes. Pull requests, you're right, sorry for that. Here it is. And actually, right now, if you saw it, it was yellow for a moment and then it switched to green. It just finished merging the pull request. Actually, not merging the pull request, it finished building running the job to build around this pull request, validating it. And now this changed, and soon I will be able to.
What kind of checks is what's going on there? Like it's checking what?
In this case of a demo, very rudimentary test, but it depends up to you. You define the template, you define quick start. We call it build packs. They define what is happening in each of the stages of something. And that is defined. If I go back to this repository production, there is Jenkins file, and this Jenkins file defines what is going to be executed. Right now, that will differ from one case to another. It depends what you need. Right. In this case, actually, to be precise, it used the Helm to validate whether a chart is okay, and it just deployed it. Deployed the application. Didn't do any tests in production in this case. But it all depends on what you define in your Jenkins file. Right? Everything is a file in Git. You're in full control of everything. Do you wish to use Farcic as the username to comment on issues? Yes, I do. And now I do have it in production. And I'm going to quickly switch to production namespace. And I'm going to show you that it is up and running in production. It's there. And now my users can happily use it ever after. A company can earn a lot of money and all those things. Right? Questions? I know. So when you use kubectl to operate with with Kubernetes, you're always in some namespace, right? And namespaces are clusters within a cluster, right? So your application is deployed in one namespace, the other one in another, if that was the question. Anybody else? If you have no question, then why did I rush? Yes, it does work with Scala.
That was not the question. The flow you've shown, you've displayed, is for applications. Do you have other flows for example, for internal libraries within the company that go through a release process, and instead of being published, they need to be pushed to an artifact repository, and they also need to be promoted, and then you also need the release on GitHub, etc. But it's slightly different than what you've just shown. Yeah,
for example, if I use Java, there is already Nexus here. If I use Java, it would push jar to Nexus. And I used build packs to have a quick start, right? You're still in control of, you cannot completely change the process. It assumes that you're using some form of GitOps, but you're in control. Nobody forces you to deploy to production, right? You can say, there is nothing to deploy. All I do is build, test, and put it to Nexus or wherever you're keeping those artifacts.
Okay, so, sorry, my question then was, do you have suggestions already on how to do it? Because in every single company, every single organization has some slight differences. No, but I have this proxy, and you should copy it here. I was just guessing if on top of the build packs you already provide, there are others that you from CloudBees promote.
I haven't checked myself any of the build packs that might or might not be related with non-deployable things.
Artifacts, yeah.
Artifacts. I haven't checked it myself. And it's not only CloudBees. Actually, CloudBees is putting a lot of money in it, but it's open source contributions. Just check it there. If not, build it yourself and then make a pull request.
Give it a try, yeah. Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Still have the minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Yes, please.
What is that cool kind of shadow autocomplete you have in your terminal?
It's my ZSH.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just Google OH, my ZSH.
But I don't think that comes by default with.
Huh?
I don't think you get that by default with my ZSH.
You don't get it. You mean on MacBook? You don't get it by default.
I don't think so.
No. I mean, when you install it, then you do. This is one of the themes of OchMyZ. Now, if you're talking about the whole program, that's Visual Studio Code.
No. I meant that just the autocomplete you have.
Yeah, that's OchMyZSH. Okay. And I have, I don't know, one of the themes that I chose 3 years ago and never changed, and that's it.
Thanks.
It's a plugin for... Yeah, that's a shell. OchMyZSH is a shell, and then you have plugins to do stuff. But even without plugins, it does autocomplete. Because every time you press tab, it executes equivalent of command help to find out what you can do, and it's awesome. It's the best thing that happened to us last years.
How does the authentication happen between the command line tool and the Jenkins server that you're using?
It's not really authentication between. So it embraces Kubernetes fully, right? And among other things, authentication is whatever authentication you want to use in Kubernetes, which can be many different ones. Depends also how much money you want to pay, or whether you want open source and things like that. Anything but LDAP, please. LDAP. And I spent years with it, and I still don't understand how it works.
Okay. When you have a GitHub flow for your developing method, how could you wait for a true acceptance in a pull request in this method?
What do you mean? How would you wait?
If you need to accept
Patiently.
What?
How would you wait for accepting pull request?
Yes, if you need two reviews.
Yeah, it's up to you. You can either so it's up to how you set it up in GitHub, right? Jenkins just interacts with JX interacts with GitHub. I could have pressed myself there or whatever, but it's Jenkins X does not really care about how you set it up. I mean, it does care a bit, but
Your previous pull request accepted automatically.
yeah, because I configured it. I mean, this build pack comes with staging accepted automatically, meaning that it invoked the API of GitHub to accept it, and the second one waited for me to accept it, either by clicking a button in GitHub or doing whatever else is your process in GitHub, or by doing Jenkins X. Okay. Now, I don't know how much CLI can be extended with other types of acceptance, but if JX doesn't support it, then you go yourself and accept it there in GitHub.
Right. So, question is, I saw that every environment has a specific Git repository.
Correct.
And it contains the setup of that environment, right?
Yes.
So now bear with me because I never use Kubernetes, but if you have a hotfix to push and you have from your code, which is in another repository, you would do the hotfix as usual in that repository and then deploy it to staging and then production or directly to production, but then you do not have to change anything in those environments because those are settings alone, right?
You do change the environment. You need to specify what is your new version that you want to deploy.
All right, but that's it, right?
That's
nothing
change.
else. I wouldn't have to create a hotfix in that environment in particular. Yeah, just promote.
No, so let me show you very quickly. So if I go here, I mean, you can now make it much more complex than this, but this is the key here, right? I have deployed, among other things, in production, Golang HTTP 001. Your hotfix would be 001-hotfix or whatever the naming convention you use for releases.
Right. Thanks.
And if you check Jack's file, you will see that the process of the application itself, it has some conditionals. If commit is done to the master branch, then it does this everything. If it's done to let's say a branch with a name that starts with hotfix, then skip this part. Things like that. You can put conditionals easily.
It's possible to use a different, instead of GitHub, to use Bitbucket or any other.
Yes, Bitbucket, yes. I think so. GitLab for sure, Bitbucket, yes, or it will be soon. But I haven't checked all of them, but I do know that all of them were or are on the roadmap to make it. If it's not there, it will be there soon. And whenever somebody asks whether something is supported in an open source project and it happens not to be, you know what you do? You make a pull request. Don't ask what open source can do for you, but what you can do for open source.
Five minutes away.
Does Jenkins X come with any monitoring tools?
Monitoring of what kind?
All these services you're spinning up.
Jenkins X itself doesn't. You can extend it, it does, but that's usually a separate story. In case of Kubernetes, you would set up Prometheus with exporters alert manager, and if you like looking at random colors, then Grafana as well. That's more or less standard in Kubernetes.
And there you specified a specific version that should be running on that environment, right? 001.
I said Jegs promote this version to that environment.
But being Kubernetes available there and being logged into it is technically possible. Somebody talks directly to Kubernetes going through this.
No.
No?
No, it's not. You need. It is possible if that somebody. Actually, I'm not going to show you because I have other clusters. My kubectl has a file kubeconfig that has all authentication that I'm using right now to access.
Yeah, you are authenticated, or you can do it,
yes.
or somebody in your team that is.
Yes.
But it's available there to make changes to the Kubernetes without going through this config file. Is correct? Is it?
So you have two things, right? One is who can access the cluster.
Correct.
And another one is who can do what in that cluster.
Yes.
So you set up permissions like you can manage this namespace, which happens to be namespace of this application.
So I'm not that worried about the permission. What I'm worried is about what you have running is being off versus what you have written in the config files.
I don't understand. I'm sorry.
So through Jenkins X,
yes,
you have changed one of these files in the repository that says that this specific version has to be deployed here.
Yes, correct.
But can you somehow bypass that and deploy a different version manually?
Without Jenkins X, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, if you just so each of those repositories is connected to a different job. If I now go and make a commit directly here,
So
okay, let's do it.
Instead of Jenkins X, you could modify
if
this
I
file.
if I do now put here O2 and save it, it would run the job that deploys to production.
Okay, and can you, without running that specific job, can you go and make a change to the environment somehow?
Like with kubectl,
Yeah.
or yes, you can,
And
but don't.
Exactly. That was where my question is going. If that happens for some reason, will this system detect that?
Next time it will not detect that, but next time a build is executed, it would converge to whatever is specified in repository.
Okay, so that is not monitored, but the next time you apply something, you're going to
Yes.
override whatever change.
Yes.
Cool.
Now, if your problem is I have children working in my company and they
No,
sometimes touch random stuff, then that's it. But yes, I mean, so it's not monitoring, do I really have this version? Do I really have? No, it's simply, it does whatever, it applies changes from GitHub repository and forgets about it, right? If you change it manually, it will not detect that until the next commit. But that should not prevent you from having what I said before. Prometheus Alert Manager monitors everything. You monitor everything, and you react to those things, but
Sorry.
not through Jenkins X.
We have time for just one more question.
Okay, who's the lucky lady? You're the lucky lady.
What's the status on deployment strategies, blue-green versus 1 to 10 to 100 to rollout deployments?
So again, that depends on what you want to do in Kubernetes, right? Jenkins X. So build pack comes with some predefined in case of build packs. Most of them are rolling updates, simply because rolling updates are 95% of deployment strategies used in Kubernetes. I'm yet to understand why people insist on blue-green. I'm yet to find out why everybody likes it, except because Martin Fowler said it 10 years ago, before Kubernetes was invented. But yes, you can, again, it's a Helm chart, and Helm chart specifies for this resource, this is a strategy, right? If you use different strategies, it's up to you. Jenkins doesn't care. It will apply whatever Helm chart says, tells it should be done. Think of Jenkins X and Jenkins in general as integrator of stuff, right? You define what that stuff is. No? That's it? You can go. Have coffee, something.
Thank you.